Spending all waking hours in the pitch darkness does something to you. Messes with your head. Humans need sunlight. We're not meant to be nocturnal. And when that darkness turns on you, when it starts feeding on your sanity, when you start feeling too comfortable down there, that's when the horrors creep up on you. It wasn't supposed to be a career, you know. I just got bored with school, wanted to take a year off, earn some money, figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I got the job through family connections. That's how these things usually go. Waterproofing tunnels. It was merciless, hard labor, both physical and mentally, but it also paid extremely well. I'd spent a few months doing portal jobs, that's what we call tunnel entrances, before I was assigned to the subsea tunnel. The portals were pretty straightforward, but often extremely demanding physically, since we'd more often than not had to haul the gear on top of them ourselves. Drills, rolls of membranes, welding machines, all backbreakingly heavy stuff. So I was pretty stoked when I got assigned an actual tunnel gig. The project was pretty hush-hush. We all had to sign fairly extensive NDAs before we got on the plane. Military-grade stuff. That's one of the reasons why I won't be disclosing the exact location of it. The other reason being that I don't want anyone finding out what we did. It is best left alone down there, in the depths. The tunnel wasn't supposed to be very long, about 3 miles, but there'll always be problems when you're digging through subsea rock foundations, so things moved along at a snail's pace. It also didn't help that the shifts seemed to be hopelessly undermanned. I got there pretty late in development, and the Gnome, a massive state-of-the-art drilling rig, was about halfway through when my foreman assigned us to our shifts. I was teamed up with a couple of veterans, some local teenagers on temporary contracts, and a new hire, Paul. Paul and I got along pretty well from the get-go. We were both fairly young, had much of the same taste in music, and we both had a laid-back mentality to life in general. The shifts were grueling, 12 hours in the depths, 6 days a week. Then we'd have a day off to adjust from day shift to night shift, or vice versa. So, working with people you could tolerate became a prerequisite for sanity down there. I say down there, which might be confusing. Tunnels usually go through mountains, right? But we're talking about subsea tunnels here. You can imagine the layout like a valley, going gradually down from the mainland to a certain depth deemed structurally safe, then gradually ascending the surface on the other side. The lowest point is called the sink, since all the water seeping through the foundations will end up there. A massive pumping system will have to be activated 24/7, pumping all the water back out, lest we all end up drowning and the tunnel caving in on itself. The lowest point in this particular tunnel was just short of half a mile under sea level, and the Gnome had passed this point no more than a day before I started my first shift. Since both Paul and I were pretty new and didn't have welding license yet, we were both assigned to ditch duty. The veterans hated ditch duty, but I found it quite relaxing, soothing even. I won't bore you with the details, but I can quickly explain what it entailed. In order to properly install the waterproof membranes, someone had to crawl into the ditch behind the tunnel elements and secure the membranes to the structure. It was a cold, wet, and dirty job, and it took goddamn forever. But you can move at your own pace, since no one wanted to go back there to check on you, listen to music, and if you didn't mind the solitude and pitch blackness, it was a fairly chill job, all things considered. Things got weird already on the first shift. A couple of the locals were sent back up after a few hours, and no one seemed to know why. One of the guys from another shift claimed they'd been found lying on the ground having some kind of seizure. but he hadn't seen it himself. Epilepsy or something, he shrugged. The gnome had suddenly stopped too, the operator refusing to drill any further. "We aren't supposed to be here," he shouted hysterically as they dragged him out. He was replaced the next day. I just sat in my ditch, listening to music, slowly securing the membrane. I wasn't in a hurry, and since the gnome wasn't moving, there was no point in rushing it. Paul was in the ditch on the opposite end of the tunnel, but we'd meet up for a smoke every hour or so. We had started at the top, so we were slowly edging ourselves closer to the sink. It would probably take a week or so at this pace, however. The next day, one of the veterans of my shift was badly injured. Hank, I believe his name was. He somehow got his arm tangled in the steel arches supporting the membranes, and hung there, screaming for an hour or so before someone finally got him loose. The arm couldn't be saved, though. Last I heard, he was still in the hospital. Mental one now, though. He kept mumbling crazy stuff as they hurried him off to the ambulance. Teeth, he said. Too much teeth. This kept happening more or less daily, but the foreman didn't seem to care. People getting hurt in freak accidents, mumbling crazy stuff as they were carried out. Gnome operator after gnome operator being replaced without so much as an explanation. At the end of the first week, our shift was down to Paul, me, and a single veteran, Norm. We were all sitting around a table in the local bar, adjusting to our night shift in style, talking about the weird stuff that had happened. "You guys don't get it," Norm said drunkenly. "There's something down there." "Shut the hell up," I said, shotting a vodka. "It's just your mind playing tricks on you." "Screw you," he spat. "I know what I saw. I know what Hank saw. It wasn't normal. I'm not going down there again. I'm leaving tomorrow." "What?" Paul said. "They're not going to let you do that. You'll lose your damn job." "I don't care," Norm mumbled. "I'll find something else. Better than ending up like Hank." There was something about the look in his eyes. Hollow, far away, frightened. I didn't believe him, of course. Couldn't believe him. Stupid story didn't make any sense. Some face poking out of the wall, featureless, misshapen, lots of teeth. "There wasn't anything but teeth," Norm whispered. "Grotesquely oversized human teeth. Scared the living hell out of me." He kept his word, left the next day. The foreman yelled at him for half an hour, but he didn't care. Just dropped his gear right at the foreman's feet and walked out of the door. Paul and I stood there. We were the only ones left on the shift, but we had no clue what to do. We'd only been in the ditch so far. Didn't know nothing about anything else. "Just stay in the ditch," the foreman said. "I'll have a new supervisor by the end of the week." So, we did. Inch by inch, we worked our way down towards the sink. The gnome ran sporadically, but mostly it just sat there idling. No one wanted to operate it. No one really could. It usually took weeks of training to even get the most basic understanding of it, but there weren't anyone around to teach it. They'd all either quit, gotten themselves horribly injured, or went stark raving mad. By the end of the week, even I started to question whether or not the money was worth it. Paul was acting really weird as well. I think it began when the deafening sound of the sink became the dominant soundscape. Even blasting my headphones at maximum volume wouldn't completely replace that eerie, hypnotizing mixture of water flowing and the machine pumping. Paul stopped meeting me for our hourly smoke breaks. I didn't see him for entire shifts, and when I did, he looked pale and worn, and his gaze seemed to go right through me. His eyes were shifty, and he would sweat and shiver convulsively. I tried talking to him, but he just mumbled incoherently, quickly retreating back to his room. Something was wrong, but I shrugged it off. Probably just a bug, a cold maybe, the flu, something of this world, something I could understand. People kept disappearing though. They couldn't hide it anymore. There were barely anyone left in the tunnels at all. The foreman wouldn't listen to a thing I said. He just threatened to fire me if I kept asking questions. "Keep your questions to yourself, Murphy," he'd say, "and keep your eyes on the ditch." I only had 5 days left of my shift. Then I'd have a couple of weeks off to recharge, recuperate, enjoy my big fat paycheck. Money talks, no doubt about it. I could make it. 5 days, no sweat. I hadn't seen Paul for days, and as I sat there in the darkness, listening to the droning of the sink, I felt something deep down that I just couldn't ignore. I don't know if it was fear exactly, but it was definitely fear-related. I'd describe it as an extremely unnerving sensation of dread or an ominous premonition of some kind. Something was wrong. Something was different somehow. I crawled out from my ditch into the main tunnel, but nothing changed. The horrible feeling lingered. I decided to check on Paul. Maybe he had the same sensation. Maybe he felt it too. I crawled into the ditch on the other side, but soon found myself overcome by confusion. Paul was nowhere to be seen. But stranger still, it didn't look like he'd been doing any work. As far as I could tell, not a single part of the membrane was secure for several hundred yards. What the hell had he been doing down here for the last week? And where the hell was he? I crawled up and down the ditch, yelling his name, but there was no response. Nothing but the deafening, all-consuming sound of the pumps. I quickly realized there was only one place I hadn't looked. One place we weren't supposed to go. The sink itself. It was located on Paul's side of the tunnel, a small, cramped corridor running from the ditch for about 50 yards before it expanded into a vast chamber housing a deep pool of water and a massive pumping system. I'd only been there once on my very first day, and we were strictly forbidden from going anywhere near it unsupervised. A single malfunction to the system could potentially bring the whole tunnel down, and only trained engineers should operate it. Of course, we didn't have any trained engineers anymore. They were gone too. I nervously followed the corridor to the sink, desperately covering my ears. As I stood on the ledge overseeing the pool, I noticed something on the other side. By the pumps. Something I didn't see last time I was there. Something extremely bizarre. Something absurdly out of place. A door. A finely adorned white wooden door, like from a Gothic mansion or something. The door didn't go into the rocky wall or anything. It just stood there, vertically, like someone had forgotten they'd left a damn door in the middle of the walkway. I slowly made my way around the pool, never letting the thing out of my sight. I just knew it had something to do with whatever was going on down here. Knew it had something to do with Paul. It had a strange, curved handle with a misshapen figure carved at the end of it. I cautiously grabbed it, feeling a grim cold run all the way up my arm to my shoulder. I slowly opened it, expecting to see nothing but the rocky wall behind it, but immediately stepped back in shock as my mind slowly tried to comprehend what I was seeing. I can't really explain it, not in a way that makes sense, but the door led somewhere else. A long, narrow hallway stretched as far as the eye could see, and upon the smooth walls of it, I could see ancient runes, symbols, carvings, of which appeared completely unknown and alien to me. But what really got my attention was the blood. Deep pools of blood all over the ground. I continued to step back instinctively. As I did, I noticed something moving in the distance, something coming towards me at unnatural speed. I stepped back. It kept coming. Stepped back, coming. I could see it now, clear as day. It was moving erratically, abnormally, like it didn't will its own motion. Rather, it was convulsing, shuddering, spasming towards me. I have no idea how to describe the thing to do it justice. I'm not sure it's even possible. It was pale, misshapen, crooked and deformed, racing towards me on 6 spindly, tentacle-like appendages. But the face, the head, teeth, too much teeth, grotesquely oversized human teeth. I was frozen in fear as I watched it come closer and closer, drooling and shrieking discordantly. I quickly realized that I couldn't just retreat. I had to close it. I had to close the damn door. I snapped back into reality and bolted towards it. Moments before the creature reached me, I slammed it shut. But before it closed, just briefly, I saw something that horrified me even more than the creature itself. Dangling around its neck, a hard hat. Paul's hard hat. Look, I don't know what the hell happened down there. Was the creature Paul? Did the creature eat Paul? To me, it didn't matter. The thought of either sent shivers down my spine. So, I didn't hesitate, didn't question it, did the only thing that made sense. I messed up the pumps. I figured a few well-placed strikes with a heavy wrench would do the trick, and it turned out I was right. A wailing alarm siren suddenly went off, accompanied by furious blinking lights. There was no time to waste. I ran as fast as my legs could bear me. I reached the surface about the same time as the tunnel collapsed behind me. The rising water devoured just about everything, and eventually, the structure just couldn't hold. I blamed everything on Paul. Couldn't find it in me to tell them the truth. Who the hell would believe me? I don't go near tunnels anymore, especially not subsea ones. I don't know what the hell we found down there, but I know it wasn't meant for this world.